I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. What should I say when we do hunter videos? Greetings Kindred is not going to work. Greetings Canites is not going to work. Greetings Cellies? I really hate what hunters call themselves. No. Today we're going to be talking about Hunter the Reckoning, and I think I'm going to try. And I want to point that out there. I'm under bold, italics, underlined, different color font, everything. Try to put a Hunter video out on Saturdays. We need to discuss Hunter. This game has been out for a little while. A while ago, I got the book. It's such a great game, and it's a great introduction to the world of darkness because you get to see everything as monsters as intended in other games. But this time, I have such a great thing to talk to you guys about because I played Hunter the Reckoning with my kids. I ran a PG-13 Hunter game, World of Darkness game that was comprehensible and fun. Everybody had a great time. We had 4 players, and it just went really, really well. And I wanted to discuss with you guys how it happened, and what we did. We had a character creation day. Everybody came over to the house. We sat around the kitchen table. We went through the book. We did the character creation, and we had a great time. That was fun, just coming up with ideas and backstories and what creeds we liked. And what edges we liked was a lot of fun. And for those of you who do not know, Hunter the Reckoning, even though I'm using the old, we're using the old Hunter the Reckoning logo in the back here, it has changed quite a bit. In the old version, they were humans that were imbued with these amazing gifts and powers from some divine source or demonic source that was never really understood fully. Hunter the Reckoning 5th edition is more like Hunter the Vigil, or the old Blue Book Hunter for Laws of the Hunt, or the old Hunters Hunted. It's humans using human ingenuity and abilities to trump the darkness, to be the light in the darkness. And I gotta say, it's a lot more fun in my opinion, because you have to be more inventive. It's not just, I'm going to point my faith at this thing and harm it. Where that does come into play a little bit, it doesn't overwhelm things with supernatural powers when people just wanted to play human. And in the game that we played, we really got to feel the frailty that is these humans. Now, we played a very interesting style. I put them through their session 0 first, which was a lot of fun. They were kids who were just graduating high school in the game. These kids are actually a little bit younger than that, but they were just graduating high school in the storyline, and they were being sent to Mexico to celebrate. It was a school trip, which I had members of Revenant families show up at their houses to talk their parents into letting them go to these things, when actually it was this grand Sabbat sacrifice that I was doing. Yes, a vampire storyteller, I went with what I know, and I threw them against the Sabbat, which was probably really mean, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been. I gave them a horrific backstory that they had to deal with in their session 0. It was more along the lines of reaction. There was a little bit of dice rolling to go with it, but it was how they handled themselves, which is what I really cared about. When they arrived, they had a wonderful day at the shops and enjoyed themselves, and I threw a couple of awareness checks to find that they were being watched by the chaperones, which seems normal, but it was giving them an eerie feeling. As the sun was starting to go down, they started to get load into this large villa, where a party was just going crazy. There was a DJ, there was food, there was drinks, everything was insane. Things started to get out of hand as drugs and alcohol started to get involved, and then it was really interesting because I ended up throwing in awareness checks. This is, I think, probably the primary check that you should throw in something like this, where they realized that the gates to this villa were all being locked and chained and padlocked and stuff, and people couldn't get out at that point. So they all went to share what they had noticed. They ended up attempting to go inside and getting blocked by a guard. It was a guy wearing a mask, which wasn't that strange because I had set this party up as having a lot of people wearing different costumes. One of the players, though, chose a character whose ambitions in life was to become a stand-up comedian, and they were actually able to throw a charisma check to tell a joke to get this guy to let him inside, which was very interesting. I've been running this game, World of Darkness setting, for 2 decades now, and I've never really seen the comedian aspect that could go through. But he was able to make this guy laugh to get him inside. So they went inside and they went to one of their rooms and were discussing what was going on and how freaked out they were getting over this whole thing. They were in this small little cruddy room, and while they were by one of the windows that overlooked down into the party, they had overheard a couple of the guards talking about how the bloodbath was going to begin. And the situation I had basically thrown them in was the game was set back in 2009, so it was actually a little bit in the past. We wanted to have access to cell phones, but also not have the whole situation with the SI and all that stuff right yet as they were playing. So what we ended up doing was they had overheard that, and they ended up accidentally making some noise. And somebody came and banged on the door, which they, flipped out about. One of them hid under the bed. One of them hid inside of the closet. And the other one was just like, well, if nobody's in here, it's going to look strange. So he just stood out there, which was great. It was actually my kid who did that, and I was laughing so hard. So I had this, big, gruff, biker-looking guy bust in and be like, what were you screaming about? And my kid is just like, there's a rat. There's a rat over there. So the guy comes in and starts sniffing around the room, trying to figure out where it is. And while he's doing that, I explained that my kid heard the door shut. And the one who was hiding underneath the bed, he saw the shadows in between the floorboards lift up, turn slightly, and shut the door. So I basically said that the first vampire that these poor kids, and it was 3 out of the 4 of them at this point, because the 4th one had not yet quite joined the game as of yet. The first vampire I decided to throw at them was a Lasombra. And I understand that was very mean, but I was really going for cinematic explanation over the ability to just pound these kids into dust. I wanted to be able to give them a story where they saw things that would be terrifying and not really just kill them for no reason. I wanted them to be able to survive this. So the one who's in the closet ends up making a little bit of a noise, and the Lasombra turns and goes, there's the rat, and goes to walk towards him. And as all that's happening, the one who's under the bed, who has a knife at this point, is sneaking up, and he says, hey. And as he says, hey, the one who's in the closet grabs a hold of the hanging rod and kicks the doors open, the double doors open in the closet, hitting the guy really hard. And he hits the bed. The Lasombra hits the bed, and the kid was hiding under the bed, who had the knife, just slams his knife down. Probably more violent than I anticipated things were going to get, but you know what? We've got some kids here who've got some angst and stuff. This is a good chance. This is a good game and setting for them to be able to let some of that out. So I went ahead with what was going on, and during the panic, they started freaking out at each other, or at least the two started freaking out the one who stabbed him, talking about how he had killed him. And what he had actually done was he had taken the knife and hit him in the back of the head with the pommel, with the little ball at the bottom of the knife. So I ended up having Shadow come up from the floorboards and wrap around the kids, missing the one who was in the closet, who at this point had broken the hanging rod. And as the Lasombra is coming towards her, because this was our one female member, I was so proud of her, because this is her first World of Darkness game. It's her first foray into the World of Darkness completely. She takes it, holds it, and just rams it into the guy. and ends up staking him. She won a staking test and everything. I was actually very impressed. However, in her panic, she unstaked him and then kept going for it. It was really, really bad because at first they're sitting there talking about how this guy had killed the guy, but then he got back up. And then she's just sitting there with this wooden rod from the closet just plunging him over and over and over and over again. And he just turned into a greasy pile of ash on the floor. It was bad. So, of course, we've got the one guy who's the kid with the knife. I should give you guys names. The characters' names. At least. We had Andy, who was being played by my kid. We had Johnny, who was being played by his friend. And we had, what was the other one? And then we had Lottie. So Andy, Johnny, and Lottie. They're screaming at Johnny. Lottie actually kills the guy. And then Johnny, being a D&D player kind of person, loots the corpse, of course. He steals the guy's jacket. He steals whatever weapons he can find on him. And they start freaking out, like realizing that they needed to get out of there. So Lottie, being in a panic, opens the door, runs outside, and comes, not face to face, but like down the hall is that guy in the mask again. The guy who let them through. And she's got the pole, and she holds it towards him, and she's like, "I'm not afraid of you." And he lifts up his mask, and it's a Nosferatu underneath. So, second vampire I've got them going up against is a Nosferatu. She screams. Johnny acts on instinct, grabs a hurricane lantern from the room, because for some reason this place is just lit primarily by hurricane lanterns. I don't know why. He grabs a hurricane lantern and throws it. Doesn't hit the guy, but gets close enough to have the guy, the Nosferatu, suffer from a Rorschach and run the other way. And they go, "We just started a fire. Let's knock down all the hurricane lanterns." So they start running, and as they are running past windows, they can see the bloodbath has started. So their entire graduating class is subject to what's going on, and I was descriptive but not graphic. So they end up running through this place trying to find an exit, which I had a little map out, and they were nowhere near where they needed to go, but they were just deciding to, every time they found a hurricane lantern, take it and throw it onto the ground. Just make as big of a problem as possible, and they can handle things. So they end up eventually finding an exit where I had this scrawny little guy in like a military style jacket, and he's just a scrawny little not terrifying character at all. But as they got closer to him, he went into horrid form. Yes, mean storyteller / parent. The third vampire I set them up against was a Tzimisce with horrid form. This is where the invention of the way that they were handling things really started to impress me. Kids can come up with the most amazing things. So as Lottie has her little pole and is still trying to like just fight this guy off, and he's just like, "Get away from me," like swatting at her like a mosquito, he goes to swipe at her with one of his massive claws, which is the size of the hunter, and ends up missing her. And Johnny says, as he misses her, "I am going to take my knife and I am going to pin him into the wall." Pin his hand into the wall. And he succeeds. He does it. He pins the guys to the wall, and they Scooby-Doo scramble out underneath, around the dude. So they get away, and they end up taking the gun that they took from the La Sombra at the beginning of this, and shooting open one of the locks, scattering the students, getting as many of them as they can out, running, getting to one of the buses that had dropped them off, hot wiring one of the buses, because we had one of the kids who was kind of a punker and was able to do that kind of thing, hot wires the damn bus, gets the hell out of there, and drives until the sun comes up. So they're on the other side of Mexico at this point. I basically tell them they drive till they hit water. They pass out in the van, or in the bus, and then when they wake up, they find their way to a gas station and are able to get money Western Union from them, and then Texas Rangers come pick them up and take them back to the States. That was our session 0. So that was very interesting, and then I let the kids jump 4 years. I know that sounds weird, but I wanted to get them in to where they were going, and I was trying to figure out how exactly they were going to handle themselves. What I had decided to do was let the kids answer questionings, do an out-of-character session, or not an out-of-character, do a downtime session where they answered the questions of the authorities on what happened. And they were just marked as survivors at that point. They kept their mouths shut. They didn't want to get in trouble. One of the kids, played by my youngest son, decided that he was just going to take this opportunity to GTFO and just get out of there, and he ended up taking the mask background and zeroed out so that he was basically a clean slate. Like, nobody knew who he was. He was a drifter kind of thing at that point. So I had intended that they were going to end up being sent to a mental institution. I wanted to do the whole masquerade cover-up and then have the Camarilla come after them to try to basically silence them and everything. But they handled themselves so well with the questions that I gave them that they didn't get thrown in there. They actually got out. Johnny ended up getting infamy added to his sheet because he had become basically a delinquent when all this stuff had gone down, and he was just working nightclubs at that point in time doing stand-up comedy. Lottie was a singer at prestigious clubs around, and she ended up having a backstory where she was engaged and all this stuff after high school, and everything fell apart because of the stress, and she wasn't getting into the medical field like her parents wanted her to. So she had medical abilities, but she didn't actually have them utilized. It was an interesting, like, I could not believe how many layers these kids put on themselves. My youngest son, who's playing Andy, zeroed himself out and became a librarian and decided that he was just going to spend his entire time studying the supernatural. So he decided that if he was not going to be safe, he was at least going to be educated. So at this point, the kids played their session 0. They came back in to play their second game, and what they ended up playing was, or what we ended up doing this time was picking our creeds. I let the kids have their play style, and then they decided what creeds fit after that. So it was kind of like playing a vampire game where you start off as human and then get embraced. It was kind of like that. So we had Johnny, who was an entrepreneurial hunter. He was the kind of person who used whatever little money he had to make things. He was innovative and experimental, and he worked with some street level people who made some things also that just kind of would not pass legal processing. We had an inquisitive, which was Andy, who decided that the knowledge is power route was the way for him to go, and he got a job at the library. And what he was doing was just constantly checking out any supernatural-based book, any occult-based book he could find, so that he could just learn as much as possible. And then we had Lottie, who was an underground, who she used the ability of guile and subterfuge to find out information as things were going. Now, at this point in time, she is in complete denial of everything that happened. Through the storyline, they thought, at least Johnny and Lottie thought, that they were drugged at the event, and they got out from a huge tragedy where the majority of their senior class had died. But the reason they had gotten away was because they had hallucinated because of drugs that were in the water and stuff. The only person who actually believed that anything that was going on was Andy. Enter my other child. My oldest son joined the game in the second one. We had actually sat down in between game sessions and got his character sheet already, and he brought in a faithful, which I was really amazed. I really didn't expect my son to bring in a priest of any kind. And we had this whole setup, this whole storyline where he was a member of the Society of Leopold, who did not like the way that the Society of Leopold was running. He felt that because they were starting to team up with government agents and factions and stuff like that, that they were hunting for profit more than hunting because these things needed to be hunted. So he brought in this character, and I ended up bringing in like a mentor character from him, which I will talk about in a second. And his first thing that he had to do in the game was go to each of the places of business of these 3 survivors of this horrific travesty and talk them into joining him in a hunt, which was... The boy's got 0 socials. Just gonna say, like, he was not able to do it very well. He was able to talk them into it, and then he brought them to his mentor. The whole interaction between them was so hilarious because this priest, I think his name was Father Michael. Father Michael was just so over the top religious and just no sense of how to react with people and stuff like that. And he's wearing this jacket that's all buttoned up and stuff, so he looks suspicious when he walks in there. But whenever he goes to introduce himself as a priest, he like rips his shirt open, and he's wearing the button-up shirt with the little priest collar underneath it. He's like, because, and I'm like, you're not Superman, dude, calm down. But it just became this huge comic relief thing, and he's the oldest one out of all of them, so it was just really funny. And his character knows everything that's going on, at least for the most part. So he ends up getting them, explaining to them who he is, scaring them basically into following them, and then going back and meeting his mentor, which is a character named Leo Elatius, Father Leo Elatius of the Society of Leopold. And for those of you who are in the know, Father Leo Elatius was introduced in Vampire the Masquerade Redemption as a minor antagonist for when you first wake up in 1999 and fight him. And I'm going to let you know right now that I was playing him off exactly the same as that. As a aging member of the Society of Leopold who was terrified of death and was using vampire blood to keep himself alive. Sorry for the spoiler there, but I think you guys need a little bit of background information to understand exactly what kind of stuff I was doing. But I brought them in and basically gave them a minor mission to take on one vampire that the information had already been gathered. I wanted to give them a little bit of combat, a little bit of action on this night, and not dive directly into how Hunter the Reckoning should run, which should be weeks and weeks of study, appraisal, and then a quick fight that could end up in death. Because hunters don't last that long. So as my kids are, they got all this information and they know they have to go to this bar where they know that a vampire is going to be leaving soon. For those of you who are following along with my story of Thicker Than Water, I actually did put this game in that storyline, but it's set a few years before. So it was very hilarious because some of these kids, my eldest especially, Michael, has sat in on a couple of my game sessions. And he knows some of the NPCs and how I run things. So they're all in a van waiting outside of this bar when they finally see the guy who they have pictures of and everything, all the information from, leave the bar. And they end up sending Lottie out to flirt with him. And she's trying to get him out of the public view because they're just in the middle of the street. And it's really funny because she ends up tripping and then he catches her with celerity. And he's basically trying to get her home. I ended up setting them after a vampire who was just the nicest guy in the world. It was just some random brouhaha with a high humanity who felt bad for this seemingly drunk, not drunk, but seemingly drunk girl who was trying to get to a place to stay for the night. So eventually she wears him down and is like, I could bring her home and I could feed off of her, and everybody wins on that one. But it was really funny because as she's walking them past the van, the door flies open and they stake him and miss the heart. And then they stake him and miss the heart. And then they stake him and miss the heart. I mean, oh my God, it was a freaking pincushion. At which point, this guy is like starting to freak out, and he ends up backhanding Lottie, who goes flying because he's got potence. I just sent them after a classic brouhaha. flying, hits a brick wall, and lands in trash cans, breaking almost every bone in her body. I felt so bad. She took so much damage. The guy ends up swinging, missing, and his hand goes through their van, which they just open it. They open the door, so his hand is not only just trapped in the metal, but it's also like smushed in there. And they just keep attacking, and eventually they do stake him. They bring him home. And I keep saying doctor or professor. And Father Leo Alexius is like, oh, good job. I'm glad that you caught him alive. We need to study him. In reality, he just wants to feed him, drain him, and use his blood to keep himself alive. When he sees what's going on with Lolly, and we're taking advantage of this because Lolly's player was going to be leaving town for a couple weeks, and we didn't know when we would get her back. So we went ahead and said that she was in critical condition, which that character was. Put her up in like a hospital recovery ward kind of situation in their base. And then when everybody was out of the picture, Leo decided that he was going to take a syringe of the blood from that vampire and inject it into her IV bag. So I'm putting her, and I talked with Lolly's player about this. But is it Lolly or Lottie? I talked to Lottie's player about this, and we had agreed that it would be a very good thing for the story if she had become a ghoul without knowing it. So her character is going through a huge recovery due to vampire vitae that's being pumped into her IV. And that's pretty much where I decided, like, I'm going to mess with these guys. I'm going to talk to them about it first, but I'm going to give them interesting things. We were going to roll to see if she got any of the ghoul flaws, like the budding fangs and things like that, blood addiction and all that. But that's something that we had decided together would make the story more interesting. So the next game session actually goes even worse because we decide that we are going to, the kids decide that they're just going to double down and they're going to attack this bar. This bar obviously is a front for vampires, but they do their research. They actually spend half the session just digging through books, and which is a lot of fun because I was able to give them a little bit more than most people would have. Leo Alexius obviously has been studying these things for a very long time and decides that he's going to give them some access to stuff. I end up setting up some plot lines which unfortunately have not caught on before we had to stop playing because of school starting back up. But I end up taking like the Book of Nod and the Revelations of the Dark Mother and the Yersi's Fragments and the Hunter's Apocrypha and the Silver Record, basically all the Bibles of World of Darkness, and giving them access to read it. And also the Encyclopedia of Vampirica, so they could actually have some like World of Darkness information to read up on. So they're doing that. They spend a good amount of time basically training and studying and stuff like that. And in this session, I actually started talking to them about edges, because edges work a little differently than they used to in the old system. They're no longer superpowers for the most part. They are more along the lines of just things that your character has to give them an edge. And I actually really like the way that they're done now. My son, who's playing Andy, is a librarian. So he took the library edge, and I gave him access to the Society of Leopold's Stolen Records. And he was able to look into Vampire the Masquerade books to try to figure out weaknesses and stuff. Then we have our dear Johnny, who decided that he was going to basically call in some favors with some friends and have a non-lethal bomb built, basically a glue bomb, so that we could try to catch something. Unfortunately, Lottie's player was not in town, so we basically said that she was still just on the mend. And then my oldest son, who is playing the faithful Father Michael, ends up he ended up taking like the sense the unnatural edges, which is the closest thing to supernatural you get, where when he holds on to his cross and closes his eyes and says a little prayer, he can tell who's a supernatural around him. Which I'm going to just tell you right now, he failed every single test and he found nothing. It was hilarious because he was the only one with an actual superpower, and we were relying on it to find stuff. So these guys decide, after doing a little bit of reading and a little bit of studying, that they're going to go after a ghoul. They're going to find a servant of a vampire. They're going to bring it back to their base, and they are going to question it and try to find out what's going on. This is where the people who follow Thicker Than Water are probably going to laugh their asses off. So they get to the bar, and the first thing that happens is Johnny decides that he's going to go in. So Johnny goes in, and he completely makes a wreck of himself. He starts making weird requests and asking for things, and finally the ghoul who's behind the bar of this bar, because it's the last drop bar in Portland because the game is set in the same city. The ghoul is just like, I think you're overserved. I haven't given you anything, but I'm pretty sure you're overserved, and sends him out. Then Father Michael walks in street clothes. He doesn't look like a priest, but he walks in and he sits down at the bar and he starts a conversation. He's being a little suspicious, but he's throwing his tests really well, and he's got a nice rapport going on. At which point I have Billy Smith, who is currently at this point in time just Colin Griffin's child, walks in and is reading the newspaper and sits right down next to Michael. Around this time, Miles Trent and Colin Griffin, who are in the back room playing pool, ask him if he wants to join, and Michael gets up, goes back there, and starts playing pool with two Brujah. So we have now 3 vampires in this place that's... He's just hanging out with them. It's the funniest damn thing in the world. And he has failed his tests and has no idea that they're supernatural. He does know, however, that the bartender is a ghoul. So that's the goal. He's sitting there currently with the primogen / sheriff of Portland, Oregon, his broodmate, Miles Trent, and his child, and they're just hanging around shooting the shit. It is the funniest thing in the world. Eventually, Marco, our dear late Marco, who was Billy Smith's child, runs in, collects him, and they leave together. The rest of the group outside in the van sees them leave together. It's so funny. They end up just sitting around at the bar, hanging out, until all of Clan Brujah, who's hanging out in this bar with these hunters, decides that they have things to do and leave. So it's just at that point, Father Michael, and the ghoul in the bar. And this is where things get bad. Johnny walks back in. They start trying to talk. Again, everybody's freaking out. Michael leaves. Father Michael leaves, and then comes back in and says, there's somebody hurt in the alley. You need to come out and help. And the bartender is just like, no, at this point in time. He's getting freaked out. These 2 guys are acting suspicious. They're trying to call a cab for Johnny's character, who's literally had nothing but warm milk and honey at this point in time. Everybody's like, what the hell is going on here? And then finally, Michael rolls a good charisma check to get him to go outside to see if there is actually somebody hurt in the alleyway. When they go out, however, they decide that they're just going to attack this bartender, which is really, really bad. They jump on him. Michael's got him in a chokehold. Johnny's trying to grab a hold of him. He's just trying to beat Michael off of him, and he can't get him off. He finally throws him off, runs inside the bar, and locks the door. Overpowered by a ghoul at this point. I mean, they're humans, so it's not that strange, but overpowered by a ghoul. Johnny decides that he's not going to have any of this, runs around to the back of the bar, breaks open the back door, runs inside, and as he goes in, he gets shot by the ghoul has a shotgun and shoots him. He is down. He's not dead, but he is down. At which point in time, this ghoul has already called the police with everything that's going on, because how do you handle a situation like this? You call the freaking cops. There's no reason not to. So, panicking, Andy, who's driving the van, steps on it and just runs. Father Michael's in the van with him at this point in time. After they heard the gunshot, he just got into the car. They're running. Cop cars end up surrounding the van, and Andy just puts his hands up and just deals. He's just like, this is how we do this. And then Father Michael decides that no one's going to take him alive. And he whips the door open and goes to jump out of the van, but there's so much hectic confusion that he trips and falls on his face in the street, and the cops jump on him. Andy and Father Michael are arrested and taken away. So at this point in time, we have one ghoul. At this point in time, we have one hunter who's a ghoul on the mend. We have one hunter who's been shot with a shotgun and is now in freaking critical condition, probably coma at this point, and we got the other two in jail. That's Hunter. That's where we are in our PG-13 Hunter game. We had so much fun. I don't know when we're going to be able to carry this on, but that's how this Hunter game ended. Half of them in the hospital and half of them in jail. I'd like to hear your experience with Hunter the Reckoning, or your thoughts on my kids and their crazy adventures in hunting vampires. I am Voivode Maquette, and this is our fun first Hunter the Reckoning review on everything that had happened with us. We will continue doing more Hunter projects on Saturdays. We will try. We will try to do that. But I'm loving this book. I'm having so much fun with the stuff that it offers, and I hope everybody else is too. I will see you next time. Good evening.